In Berlin, a group of high-ranking German generals gathered around a wooden table. Spread before them were reconnaissance photos and intelligence briefings. The subject of their discussion wasn't a tank or an aircraft. It was something far smaller, almost laughable. They stared at grainy images of a strange, open-topped vehicle, tiny, box-shaped, with 4 thin wheels, a folding windshield, and no armor whatsoever. One of the generals smirked. "So this is the mighty American war machine?" The room filled with laughter. "A toy for farmers," another quipped. "It looks like something for children to drive around their ranches, not into war." To the German High Command, obsessed with engineering marvels like the Panzer IV and the soon-to-be-unleashed Tiger tank, the American Jeep, as they mockingly called it, was beneath notice. It lacked the imposing armor of their half-tracks, the precision mechanics of their tanks, and the aesthetic of a machine worthy of the Wehrmacht. But what they didn't realize that day, what they couldn't have imagined, was that this little machine, produced in unimaginable numbers by an industrial giant across the ocean, would soon become the most recognized vehicle of the entire war. Thousands of miles away, in the factories of Toledo, Ohio, and Detroit, the American war machine was awakening. Not with thunder's tanks, but with the sound of steel stamping presses, welding sparks, and conveyor belts. The Willys-Overland Company and Ford Motor Company had been handed a wartime challenge: create a light reconnaissance vehicle, fast, rugged, and simple enough that a farmer's son could repair it in the mud with a wrench and a bit of wire. It wasn't about elegance, it was about purpose. The American philosophy of war was never about perfection, it was about practicality. And in that practicality lay power. As the first prototypes rolled out in late 1940, the Jeep instantly impressed U.S. Army officers. It could climb a 45-degree slope, cross streams, handle deep mud, and be dropped. In early field trials, General George C. Marshall himself called it America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. The Germans, meanwhile, continued to underestimate it. Their engineers built vehicles that required meticulous maintenance and high-quality fuel. Their designs were masterpieces of precision, but also nightmares in the field. The Tiger tank, for example, was a technological wonder that terrified Allied soldiers. Yet for every Tiger that reached the front, dozens broke down from mechanical failure or simply ran out of parts. The Americans took a different path. The Jeep was deliberately crude. Its body was angular, its seats bare, its frame open to dust and rain. But its parts were interchangeable. Its engine, the Willys Go Devil, could run for days on rough fuel. Its transmission could take abuse. Its axles were simple to repair. In 1941, as the U.S. entered the war, American industry erupted. Factories worked day and night, retooled from peacetime cars to wartime production. By 1942, Jeeps began appearing everywhere, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of the Pacific. British General Bernard Montgomery called it the most versatile vehicle ever built. General Eisenhower went further, saying that America's victory was built on 3 tools: the C-47 transport aircraft, the Duck amphibious truck, and the Jeep. The laughter that echoed in that German war room in 1940 had long since faded. By 1942, German officers began encountering these strange American vehicles in captured Allied photographs. They were everywhere, scouting in Tunisia, supplying troops in Sicily, carrying wounded from the front in Italy. In every campaign, they multiplied like ants. The German staff reports began to include notes about these vehicles. They were fast, nimble, and hard to hit. Even more concerning, Allied forces could move supplies faster than expected. A single Jeep could carry fuel, ammunition, rations, and men through terrain where German trucks would bog down. But the true scale of the coming flood was still beyond imagination. By the end of 1943, American factories had already produced more than 300,000 Jeeps. The Willys plant in Toledo alone turned out one every 2 minutes.
Ford followed the same blueprints, ensuring every part was identical. A wheel made in Michigan would fit a frame made in Ohio. The entire system was designed for mass production and repair, an industrial symphony Germany could never match. To the Germans, it was mechanical chaos. To the Americans, it was victory by simplicity.
By 1943, the war had entered its decisive phase. German generals were no longer laughing. Reports from the Eastern Front painted a grim picture. The Wehrmacht was bleeding men and machines in the endless mud of Russia. Tanks froze in sub-zero temperatures. Half-tracks sank in the thawing ground. Even the mighty Tigers couldn't maneuver in the soft terrain. But American jeeps? They were everywhere. In North Africa, they darted between sand dunes, kicking up clouds of dust. In Italy, they climbed steep hills where even mules struggled. On the Western Front, they roared down roads under artillery fire, hauling messages, ammo, and soldiers. German prisoners of war later recalled their shock at the sheer number of these vehicles. They'd never seen anything like it. They were like insects, one German soldier said. You'd destroy one, and 10 more would appear. They seemed to be everywhere, carrying officers, pulling guns, bringing supplies. We started to believe the Americans had an endless supply of them. In a way, they did. The Jeep became the American soldier's best friend. It served as command car, ambulance, radio vehicle, and weapons platform. Soldiers mounted machine guns on them, turning them into mobile firepower. In the Pacific, Marines fitted them with stretchers and radio antennas, making them lifelines in the jungle. The Germans relied heavily on specialized vehicles, the Kubelwagen and Schwimmwagen, both designed by Ferdinand Porsche for the Wehrmacht. They were efficient, yes, but far too few in number. By 1943, Germany was struggling to produce tanks, let alone light transport. Allied bombing had crippled their factories. Meanwhile, the U.S. industrial base was unstoppable. The American war machine was producing 100,000 aircraft a year, 50,000 tanks, and over 600,000 jeeps. The German economy, shackled by shortages and bombings, could never catch up.
The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of what America did best, combining engineering and efficiency. Its design reflected the American mindset: practical, flexible, unpretentious. Soldiers gave it a dozen nicknames: Peep, Bantam, and of course, Jeep. No one could agree where the name came from. Some said it came from GP, for General Purpose. Others claimed it came from Popeye's magical creature, Eugene the Jeep. But by the time Allied forces stormed Normandy in 1944, the name Jeep had become legendary. When the Allies landed in France, German defenses were overwhelmed not only by tanks and bombers, but by movement. The ability to move men and supplies at lightning speed broke the static nature of war. In the aftermath of D-Day, American columns poured through the hedgerows of Normandy. Leading them, often bouncing over rough ground, were jeeps. They carried radio operators, forward observers, and officers directing fire. The Germans, with their massive tanks and complex supply lines, couldn't adapt to this kind of warfare. In one captured German report from 1944, a Wehrmacht colonel wrote, "The enemy possesses an unlimited number of small motor vehicles, which allow great flexibility and speed of movement. Our forces cannot match this mobility." That line, buried in a wartime intelligence document, revealed everything. The Jeep represented the opposite of everything the German war machine stood for. Where Germany prized complexity, the U.S. prized simplicity. Where Germany worshipped craftsmanship, America embraced standardization. Where the Wehrmacht believed in elite precision, the Americans believed in mass production. By 1944, American logistics had become the envy of the world. Convoys of trucks, jeeps, and tanks crossed Europe like clockwork. Fuel, food, ammunition, all arrived on time. German troops, often cut off and starving, were forced to retreat. The vaunted Blitzkrieg, Germany's own concept of speed and mobility, had been turned against them. The little vehicle they once laughed at had become the instrument of their undoing.
By 1945, the Jeep was everywhere, rolling through the ruins of German cities, carrying generals to victory parades, ferrying soldiers through liberated villages. It had crossed continents and oceans, from the deserts of Africa to the mountains of Italy, from the beaches of Normandy to the streets of Berlin. German generals who once mocked it now saw it up close, driving past their captured headquarters. The once arrogant laughter had turned to silent awe. When General Eisenhower reviewed the final reports of the war, he credited the Jeep among the top inventions that had brought Allied victory. It had carried five-star generals and frontline grunts alike. It had endured bullets, mud, snow, and heat. It never stopped moving. The contrast was staggering. Germany had built machines that symbolized fear: the Tiger, the Panther, the Messerschmitt. The United States had built a machine that symbolized endurance, adaptability, and freedom. In post-war interviews, captured German officers often spoke about the American industrial advantage. General Heinz Guggenheim, the father of Blitzkrieg, admitted that Germany underestimated America's ability to mass produce. He said, "We believed they were soft. We did not understand their factories." And those factories, Ford, Willys, General Motors, had done what no army in history had done before. They had industrialized mobility. The Jeep wasn't luxurious or armored, but that was precisely the point. It could be built in massive quantities, sent anywhere, fixed by anyone. It was the triumph of quantity and practicality over complexity and arrogance. In the devastated fields of Europe, thousands of Jeeps were left behind when the war ended. They became farm vehicles, taxis, and even makeshift ambulances. In Asia, they served as police cars and delivery trucks. They outlasted the very empire that mocked them. The Germans had once said the Jeep belonged on a farm. Ironically, after the war, that's exactly where many of them ended up: plowing fields, hauling goods, rebuilding the world. More than 643,000 were produced during the war. Willys built 363,000, Ford another 280,000. Every bolt, every screw, every piece interchangeable. It was an army of machines, born not from luxury, but from necessity. In a single day of 1944, American factories could produce more Jeeps than Germany could produce tanks in a month. That scale, that industrial force, was what crushed the Reich. When the last American convoys rolled into Germany, the sight of endless Jeeps stretching to the horizon became the visual symbol of defeat. They weren't glamorous, but they were relentless, just like the soldiers who drove them. And as Allied flags were raised over Berlin, the lesson was clear. War isn't always won by the biggest, strongest, or most advanced weapons. Sometimes it's won by the smallest, simplest tools, used well, built in numbers, and trusted by the men who carry them. The Jeep proved that power lies not in arrogance or complexity, but in adaptability and unity. In the end, it wasn't German precision that conquered the world, it was American practicality. From the deserts of Africa to the streets of Berlin, from the laughter of generals to the silence of surrender, the Jeep rolled on, a humble machine that became a symbol of freedom, industry, and victory. If you were thrilled by this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your thoughts below. What do you believe the world learned from the American Jeeps and other automotives? Your support helps bring forgotten history back to life. Until next time, remember, history isn't just about the past, it's the mirror of our humanity.